recording now. Okay, so I think we're good. We'll just go ahead and let people come in, and looks like we have a few already trickling in. So.
Oh, how exciting.
Yes.
Lots of flyers have gone out. So,
yes,
yeah.
I know. I love when it shows up on Facebook. It's always like the first few minutes are like me, like just like looking at the screen and like.
Yeah, I teach here as well, and so we've been recording all of our lectures, and I've gotten okay at being able to time it exactly so when it goes on, I'm ready, and you don't have me going like, oh, and let me share my screen and pop over to the lecture slide, and okay, I'm ready.
That's way better than where I'm at. So.
Well, we don't have to do it via Zoom, and I think Zoom makes it a little bit harder.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so we've got it shared on Facebook Live, and we are recording. Yes, it shows it right up there.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's still 6 minutes before. I think we ran through everything else though, as far as like volume, visuals, rules, that sort of thing. Oh, and there's Miss Beth.
Yep. So you're going to be able to see everybody that comes on.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Okay.
how I change that in the upper right hand corner, you can change it from speaker view to gallery view.
Okay.
And that you can see everybody, but not people who have their video turned off.
Oh, right.
So, right. But I usually like gallery view while we're first coming in, just to make sure that's also protection, just to make sure that the people who are supposed to be in here are in here. And
yours, okay, so an iPad is different than what you have.
Yeah,
you'll it's see, all in different places.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be one thing that we need to use a laptop when we do Zoom.
Okay.
I find it easier.
Okay.
Because you can see different buttons more. So I guess I could probably mute myself.
Who's that good-looking lady over your shoulder there? We're glad to have you here, CSU Bug Zoo.
Oh, I'm very happy this is finally happening. I really miss coming and doing outreaches, so I'm glad we can still do it digitally a little bit.
Well, thank you. And I know it's a busy time for you guys getting ready with school and all that, so we appreciate you agreeing to be part of this.
Oh, of course. Yeah, usually we do have a lot going on this semester, but with everything going virtual, I have a lot more time to do outreaches. So I'm happy to do outreaches whenever.
Yay, thank you. I can't wait to see what you show us today.
Yeah, I have a good assortment of things.
Some slithery, creepy crawlies.
Nope, just adorable, awesome bugs.
Oh, thanks for clarifying.
Oh, there's.
Okay.
No.
Okay, just so that I can.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, hi everybody. I just wanted to give you a heads up. We have about 2 minutes till the program starts, and people are still trickling in. So, you know, bear with us. We will get started at 1 o'clock, and we're really excited to have you. It's going to be really fun looking at some creepy crawlies.
Adorable, cute.
Yeah, they're not creepy. They definitely crawl. They're cutie crawlies, really.
Maya, quick question for you. Do you need to do a screen share at all, or are you just going to be talking and showing?
I'll just be talking to the screen.
Okay, great. Okay, you guys, guess what? It's 1 o'clock. Bug Zoo Take 2 is happening. This is the Loveland Library. Thanks for tuning in on this lovely Friday right before school, or maybe some of you have started up school with things. With the weird schedule, it's kind of different depending on where you are in the community, but we're glad you're here. We have the lovely Maya from CSU Bug Zoo with us today. We had originally scheduled them in March, but as you know, a whole bunch of other things happened, and we are happy to do this virtually for you a couple months after the fact, and we're really excited. So some quick reminders. Everybody, please stay on mute. Keep yourself on mute through the presentation unless we call on you. That just helps with keeping down the background noise so that we can all hear Maya really well. And then also, I will be keeping track of things on chat. So if you guys have questions, you can raise your hand, or you can also just type it in the chat. So I hope that helps. And I think that's it, Maya. Go ahead and take it away.
Perfect. Yeah. And one thing I wanted to add is I would love to answer your bug questions, but the biggest thing is I want to make sure that everyone has time to ask questions. So if you have a question, ask yourself and make sure that it's a question first and not a bug story. Because I love bug stories, but we only have so much time. So if people want to tell me all of their bug stories, we'll run out of time and won't get a look at everything. So before you ask a question, think to yourself, does this have a why or a how in it? Because otherwise it might be a bug story and we don't have time for all of the bug stories. So with that being said, I kind of want to do a little introduction first. I'm Maya. I'm an entomologist, and an entomologist is a really cool scientist. In my opinion, the best kind of scientist. I get to go and I get to talk to people about bugs, which is amazing because bugs are so cool. And I ended up doing this because I started out wanting to do stuff with reptiles and amphibians. I wanted to be like Steve Irwin. And I took a class in college and realized, oh my God, bugs are so much cooler than anything else I know. So I love animals, and I've always loved animals, but it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that I love bugs the best. So it's okay to totally love bugs here. That's why we're here, to be super bug nerds. And hopefully, if you're a little afraid of bugs, by the end of this, you'll be a little bit less afraid of bugs. So what I want to know first is when I say bug, what kind of animals do you all think of? And feel free to throw it into the chat, and Haley will let me know what kind of animals we're hearing.
So far, I don't hear anything. What do you guys think of when you? What kind of animals do you think of when you?
Yeah,
think
like
of
just what comes to mind?
I think of ladybugs.
Ladybugs, bees, cicadas is what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
What about something like a snail? Does anyone out there think a snail counts as a bug?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. What about a worm?
That's a good
The
one.
worms bugs. They're gross. They're slimy.
I don't know. What do people think? I think I see some head nodding.
Yeah.
And then, let's see. I think people are just excited to hear what your perspective
Totally.
is on worms.
So what's really interesting about the word bug is it has two different meanings. There's like a word that people use in public just in conversation, and that can be a lot of different things. And then when an entomologist says bugs, that's going to be something very specific. So an entomologist studies something called an arthropod. And an arthropod is any animal that has more than 4 legs, so 6 or more legs, and an animal that has no backbone, so they're called invertebrates that have no spine like we do, which is pretty crazy. And then on top of that, they have this really cool thing called an exoskeleton, which is awesome. It's like a suit of armor. And so when I talk about a bug today, I'm going to be talking about only things that fall into that category of being an arthropod. So things that have 6 or more legs. We're going to talk about a couple of things that have more than 6 legs, things that have an exoskeleton, and things that have no backbones. But that means that some animals that people think of as bugs aren't really bugs. So a worm, how many legs do worms have? Not a lot, right? 0. So they can't be an arthropod. And they don't have a hard exoskeleton, so they can't be an arthropod. Something like a snail, they only have 1 foot, right? They have 1 leg or foot, so they can't be an arthropod. Something like a snake, people ask me all the time about snakes. Snakes aren't even close to being a bug. They have no legs, they don't have an exoskeleton, and they have a backbone. They miss out on all 3 of our requirements for an arthropod. So today I'm going to use the really loose definition of bug, but when I'm talking about a bug, I'm talking about something that's an arthropod. So with that being said, I want to talk about the first one I have here. So in front of me right now, I have something called a Smokey Oak Millipede. And some people have seen millipedes before. We don't get them out here that are very big. The millipedes we have here in Colorado are itty bitty tiny little ones. But you all can see that, right? You can see that it's got a ton of little tiny legs. So I'll let it crawl on my hand so you can see its legs. And it's got a bunch of legs. So the word millipede actually means 1,000 legs. And you know what's crazy? Millipedes don't have 1,000 legs. It seems like they have a lot, but they don't truly have 1,000. So the millipede that has the most legs in the world is a millipede that has 760 legs, which is so many legs. Think about how long it would take you to put your shoes on in the morning if you had that many legs. And if you were a toddler, maybe it'd take like 4 or 5 days to get out of the house because toddlers have a hard time putting on shoes. So millipedes can have a lot of legs. And the craziest thing is about that millipede that has all of those legs, it's the smallest millipede in the world. The smallest millipede has the most legs. The millipede is literally this big. It's just 1 centimeter long, and it's as thin as a human hair. And it's able to cram in all of those legs, which is incredible. And a millipede like this, the Smokey Oak Millipede, probably has close to 200 legs. And when they're born, when they hatch out of their egg, they've got some legs, and then every time they grow, they add more and more legs. So an adult millipede is going to have more legs than a baby millipede. Now, millipedes are something that's really cool. It's called a macro decomposer. Does anyone have a guess about what macro decomposers would eat? And you can throw it into the chat, and I'll be able to see what the chat says if people have guesses. So they might eat bees, maybe. Alive bees or dead bees?
I think you said dead bees.
Oh, alive bees, there we go,
Oh.
maybe. Some people say soil. They eat compost, that's pretty close. So macro decomposers are really important because they're only eating dead stuff. So if you put this millipede on a leaf, if that leaf was alive, it wouldn't eat it. It'd only eat rotten leaves. And if you look in here, I have little leaves, and you can see that they have plant matter that's been eaten. You're right. And sometimes they'll eat dead stuff too. So if there were dead bees, yeah, they'd eat a dead bee on the ground. And they're really important. Someone mentioned that they might eat soil. What's really interesting is they actually help make soil. So if you had no macro decomposers, suddenly all these things like leaves and animals that die wouldn't get broken down, and you wouldn't get all that nutrient matter broken down into soil again. So they're really important for soil. Now there's another animal that a lot of people think are very similar to millipedes. Does anyone have a guess? An animal that maybe people confuse with a millipede? Even the name sounds kind of close to millipede. It ends in pede, just like millipede. Yeah, exactly, Emma. Centipedes. So centipedes, and this isn't a real one, this is a toy because it's so big, but centipedes are a little bit different. They look very similar, but there's some pretty key characteristics that are different. So centipedes aren't macro decomposers. They're actually predators. So they're really good at running things down, and they're very fast, and they've got really good vision. Millipedes, not very fast. They're really slow, and they have terrible vision. And some of the ways you can tell them apart is if you look, a millipede has a round body. Let's see if I can show you the side. So you can see that the millipede's rounded. You saw the one on my hand, very slow, not very fast. Whereas a centipede, blends a little bit in, is really flat. The best way to tell, though, is millipedes are going to have a bunch of legs. Each little segment in their body has 4 legs, whereas a centipede, there's only 2 legs per segment. The other really easy way to tell the difference between a millipede and a centipede is if it runs. If it runs fast, it's probably a centipede. But they have these things called pseudo heads. So if you look at the 2 ends of a centipede, there's an end that has the head, and there's this other end that has something called a pseudo head. And that's where they have these little, these aren't legs, these are kind of like almost antennae, but like butt antennae. And they have them here so that they can look like the head. And what they'll do is if they're scared and they think someone's going to eat them, they'll hide into a burrow, and they'll put their butt end out, their tail end out, right? And sometimes they'll even pretend to strike like that. And then if something grabs it, like a bird, thinking that this is the head, they can turn around and they'll actually sting. And what's crazy about centipedes is, because they're eating live stuff, they need venom. So centipedes are venomous. And they have these specialized things up here called venom claws. So where do things like snakes keep their venom? Anybody know where snakes keep their venom? Yeah, fangs in their teeth, exactly. What's nuts about centipedes is they have feet. This is the first pair of legs. Their feet are venomous, which is nuts. Because, like, I can't imagine having venomous hands, but it'd be crazy cool. So they have venom glands in their head, and it pumps down into their legs, which is nuts. So these actually are called venom claws. And I can't think of anything else that has venomous feet, except for maybe a platypus. Platypus do have venomous feet too, don't they? But I can't think of any other arthropod that has a venomous foot, which is crazy. So I want to talk about another kind of arthropod, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize are arthropods. I'm going to take you all with me over here. So what kind of animals can you think of that have more than 4 legs, so 6 or more legs, and they've got a hard shell, and maybe they can live in the ocean or in water. They've got some antennae that are pretty crazy. Some of them have pretty modified, specialized little feet. Anyone think of an animal like that? Exactly, crabs. So crustaceans, so everything from lobster to shrimp to crabs to crayfish or crawdads. Those are all arthropods too. So those are bugs too. And one of the things that I talk about a lot during the semester as well is about eating bugs and how some people eat bugs and how I think more people should eat bugs. And people are always like, oh, that's so gross. And then I ask if they like things like shrimp or lobster, and people are like, oh yeah, I love lobster and crab. Well, those are arthropods too. So maybe at the end of the day, you'll be a little bit more open to eating things like crickets and mealworms if you eat shrimp and crab as well. But what I have here are some hermit crabs. Can you all see it in its shell? Yeah, so they're arthropods, they're bugs. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I like them. So does anyone know where hermit crabs live? There's a bunch of different kinds. There's 70 different kinds of hermit crabs out there. but they all live pretty close to the same thing. Yeah, so they're all going to either be in the ocean or near the ocean, which is awesome. There aren't any freshwater hermit crabs out there. And one of the cool things about hermit crabs is they're macro decomposers too, which a lot of people didn't realize. They're scavengers, so they're helping to break things down. So if a hermit crab was living on a beach and they came across a dead fish, they'd think, excellent, an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? Or maybe they're walking along and they find someone's dropped soggy sandwich. Perfect. They'd love to eat someone's sandwich. These guys are going to be running around trying to find different food that's starting to rot maybe, but they aren't hunting food. They're not looking for food in trees. They're trying to find things that are already fallen down and something they can scavenge off of. They're pretty quick. Yeah, they can be pretty quick. The other really cool thing is they're really social. So a hermit is usually someone who hides away. But I think they shouldn't be called hermit crabs at all because they are super social. In fact, in the wild, they can live in hermit herds of up to 200 different hermit crabs. And they'll squeak to each other and they'll groom each other and they like to hang out with each other. So if you have them as pets, you can never have less than 3 hermit crabs because they'll get lonely and they can die of loneliness, which is crazy to me. Now, in the wild, they're eating a whole bunch of different stuff, but if you keep them as pets, you can see how much they like to move around. So they need a lot of space if you're going to keep them as pets. So each hermit crab wants to be able to climb. They love to climb. They'll climb all the way up to the top of a tree if they can. And they like to dig, so they need really deep soil that they can burrow into as well. And they're hermit crabs, right? So they're still a crustacean, so they have gills. So they need to be able to get into water as well, so they can keep their gills wet. Otherwise, they can't breathe very well. And you're right, they have shells, and they don't make those shells. This is actually a turbo snail shell. So they find other shells from other animals, and that's what they use. Sometimes they use not shells. Sometimes they'll use garbage, which is, I think, kind of sad, but they'll use shells. And it's just like how people feel about shoes. Some hermit crabs want a very particular kind of shell. They want something that's going to have a round opening. Some hermit crabs will only pick green shells. Some hermit crabs will only pick brown shells. Some hermit crabs will just switch. They need to switch when they get bigger, but sometimes they'll just switch when they find a better shell. And one of the things I've seen before is we had a hermit crab that had 2 favorite shells and it couldn't pick which one. So it'd drag one of the shells around with it, and then throughout the day it'd switch back and forth, but it had to drag that shell with it. Oh, they can be so picky. They have to bring their shells with them because I didn't want anyone else to take their shell too. So they have favorite shells, and different hermit crabs can have different tastes in what they want in a shell. And even different individual hermit crabs can have different favorite foods. So we have 20 hermit crabs here, and some of the hermit crabs really like fruit. Some of the hermit crabs really like corn, and some of the hermit crabs absolutely love peanut butter, but not all of them like the same food the same amount. So at the Bug Zoo, I feed them a bunch of different kinds of food so that everyone gets to try their favorites. Now, I saw someone asked whether or not how they can get in and out of their shell, and that's a great question. Hermit crabs have 10 legs. They're in a group called Decapoda, which literally translates to 10 legs. Science is really easy sometimes with how they name things. And so some of these legs are used to help walk around, so you can see it walking around. Some of those legs are used for pinching, so you can see its pincher right there. But they have 2 legs that they actually hold down by their abdomen, and they'll lock themselves into their shell. So if you look at a hermit crab in a shell, it's going to have walking legs, and then it's like braced itself inside of a shell. So when it wants to change shells, it just relaxes its legs and it can pop out. And then they've got this really weird shrimp-like looking body. A naked hermit crab looks really weird. I don't like them. They look weird without their shells. But they need their shells to live, otherwise they can't survive without a shell because they're not designed to be able to protect themselves without that shell. Does anyone else have hermit crab questions or crustacean questions? So they each have different personalities. So some hermit crabs can be really scared or really shy, and other hermit crabs are really social and curious. And so I have a bunch, and so I know which ones. So like this is one that's more shy, but the ones that I bring to come on camera, I purposely pick ones that like to investigate and don't pinch. The only times I've been pinched by this one was when I wasn't paying attention and it walked off the side of my hand and got scared. And so it grabbed itself. And then as soon as I put my hand underneath it, it let go. But some hermit crabs will pinch, some won't. It's kind of like dogs. Some dogs like kids, some dogs don't like kids, some dogs like strangers, some dogs don't. It's just like hermit crabs. They kind of, if you picture a shrimp, that's what they kind of look like. So they look like a normal crab up front and then like a weird curled shriveled tail. They look weird. If you Google them, you can find hermit crabs without their shells. It looks bizarre and unnatural. So I'm going to shift gears away from hermit crabs and move to something else. And it's an animal that has 6 legs. Sometimes they get into people's houses and people don't like them. We don't really have them here in Colorado, but they're sometimes in places like Texas and Florida. They're big. Some people call them palmetto bugs. Anyone have an idea? What's like they can be big. They can get in your house. Not a tarantula, 6 legs. Some of them can fly. They've got a really bad connotation. If you think of like a gross bug that you don't want in your house, what kind of bug do you think of? Yeah, exactly, Elisa. A cockroach. So we don't really have cockroaches here in Colorado. It's a little too dry. They don't do very well. But cockroaches are an insect that's all over the planet. As a matter of fact, there's over 3,000 different species of cockroach out there, which is so many kinds of cockroaches. And some people are like horrified about the idea of 3,000 different kinds of cockroaches. But out of 3,000 kinds of cockroaches, only 30 of them are considered pests. So that's like less than 1% of the hermit crabs out there are considered to be pests, which is awesome. So I have a kind here that are not pests. They're actually a kind that people keep as pets. They're called Madagascar hissing cockroaches. Let's see if I can get them to hiss. No. So why do you think a cockroach would hiss? When do you think a cockroach would try to hiss? Do you think a cockroach would hiss when it's happy or when it's not happy? Yeah, exactly, when they're scared. And so these cockroaches, they come to outreaches with me all the time. And so they don't really care if I pick them up anymore. So I can't get them to hiss anymore. They're like, whatever, poke me, pick me up. I don't even care. So I have a bunch of different ones. This is one little group. I keep them in small family groups because they'll actually stay together and they'll clean each other. And you can see that they've got these nice little spots. Do you see those white holes along their sides? Those are something called spiracles, and that's awesome. So when arthropods breathe, they don't do it like people or other animals at all. They do it completely uniquely. And they've got this series of holes along their sides that periodically will open up and let air in and out and then close up again. And that's because they don't want to dry out. The number one thing that a thing has to worry about that has an exoskeleton is drying out. So you always want to make sure that you keep arthropods in a place where they have access to water, but also if you have arthropods that you don't want anymore, so if you have like pests, that you use something called diatomaceous earth, which is something that dries them out really fast. So one of the most effective ways that we control arthropods is through drying them out or controlling their environment. So I saw someone had a question. Yeah, Molly, what's your question? Oh, maybe it's a long question. She's still typing.
Oh, you can also talk.
Yeah, so they do turn white.
Oh.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is all these.
I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere that they turn white. Awesome.
Yeah, they do, and it's awesome. It's this thing called molting, or if you use the science word, it's ecdysis, which is like a nutty word. But they're stuck in this like suit of armor, right? And so every time they have to grow, they have to break out of that suit of armor and pull themselves out. And when they do that, they're all soft and squishy and white. And then they'll pump up their muscles so they can get big and hold it there for a little bit, like a couple of hours until the exoskeleton scleratizes or darkens and hardens, and then they stop being white and they're hard. So if a cockroach were to do that, and I've done this before, when they first molt, when they come out, you can put your thumbprint in it. So it's like an identified cockroach. So they'll have your thumbprint on them because once it hardens, it doesn't go back again, which is crazy. Oh, they make great pets. You know why? What do you think cockroaches eat? Does anyone have a guess about what cockroaches eat?
Trash.
Yeah, it's kind of a theme, isn't it? Everything I grabbed here so far today is a macro decomposer. These ones are another one that aren't going to eat alive stuff. They're not going to eat fruit off of a tree. They're going to eat the rotten fruit that fell off of a tree or sometimes trash. And so,
Compost.
yep, they'll help, and they help build compost. So at the Bug Zoo, you know what these guys got to eat last night? I brought in some of my leftover broccoli stumps because I had broccoli 2 nights ago. So I bring in my food scraps, and that's what they love to eat. And also, here's a secret about cockroaches. Do you know what a cockroach's absolute favorite food is? Dog kibble. They love dog kibble. They cannot get enough dog kibble. It's kind of like potato chips for them. It's something that's got some grains in it. It's got some grease. It's like fatty. It's salty. It has protein in it. They love dog food. So we give them a little bit of dog food, but mostly they get fruits and vegetables. And then again, there's some leaves in here. They get to munch away at the leaves. But when they get things like broccoli and carrot tops and stuff like that, they much prefer those to the dead, dry leaves. So that's really cool. The last thing, and let's see if I can zoom in enough that you'll be able to see this. The last, oh, do you hear her? Did you all get a chance to hear her hiss? Maybe. The last thing is, yeah, it's crazy cool. And the way they hiss is they keep air in their abdomen. And if they get spooked, they go, hurry, and they squeeze all their guts and they squeeze all their muscles, and it forces air out of those spiracles, those holes on their sides, and that's how they hiss. So they aren't hissing through their mouth, they're hissing through their body, which is also crazy.
So they don't hiss like hiss, but they just hiss like through their bodies. They squish it, and then it blows through as fast as it can. And it'll create a vortex like that.
Yeah, so it's nuts. They can actually run out, so they can't hiss infinitely like a cat can. They have to wait for that air to slowly build up again, and then they can hiss again. Do you have another question, Molly? And you can just unmute yourself if you want to ask it.
What happens when they get pregnant? Do they?
So this is a pregnant cockroach. So when it's with arthropods, we don't call it pregnant, we call it usually gravid. And what's really interesting is most arthropods lay eggs. Almost all of them do. But there's some crazy exceptions, and cockroaches are one of them. So when she looks like she's pretty well developed, so probably tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, what she'll do is she'll actually give live birth, just like a mammal, which is nuts. So when cockroaches lay eggs, they have these things called ootheca, and they're like an egg case, and they'll have the egg case come out, and then it'll harden, and then they'll absorb it back into their body, and they'll let it develop internally. And then once they develop, the eggs hatch inside of her body, and then she opens up her, she's got a birth port right there, and then all the babies will come out, and they're small and white and soft, and they're about this big. They're like the size of a watermelon seed. And then it takes them 3 years to get this size. So this species is a long-lived species, which is why people keep them as pets, because they can live a long time. Yeah, so we have, I have a bunch of different kinds at the Bug Zoo because I really like cockroaches, but the most common pet cockroach is the Madagascar hissing cockroach.
Actually, if you even cut them, they'll still be alive because they have many hearts.
So what's really interesting is they don't even have really like a heart. So they've got this thing called a dorsal vessel, which is just a big tube. So the way an arthropod works, and actually I'm going to grab a prop. So with people, the way that we have blood and everything in our bodies is we've got like veins, and those veins get smaller and smaller, and all of our blood is contained in little packages in our body, so we don't have blood just flowing everywhere. We have it in like a highway system almost, but in an arthropod, they're just like an open bottle like this. And so they just have all of their blood, all of their organs and everything floating around like that. And what they have is this thing called a dorsal vessel, and it's like an open tube, and it's actually going to kind of pump the blood that's floating around in their body and then pump it across their back and then out again. So it's a tube, and they only have one. But what you're talking about is this thing called a ganglion, which is another crazy science word, and that's their brains. Instead of having one brain like we do, they've got a bunch of tiny little underdeveloped brains along their bodies called ganglia. And so with the cockroach,
when cockroaches have to put glands blood in their body, it goes like this,
Yeah, it like pulses and it kind of pushes it. So it's kind of like a pump in a pond, right? So there's a pond of water, right? And there's a little pump that pulls water up through maybe a fountain or something like that and then pushes it back out and then it's just flowing water again. That's what it's like inside. So they have like blood, but it just gets pumped. So it's moving, but it's all open. But that also means that if something happens to an arthropod and you like crack it open, if I were to crack this open and I dumped it, what would happen to all the blood inside? It all fall out, right? So that's why they have that exoskeleton, because it's a hard outside to keep all their things safe on the inside. But what you're right that cockroaches can still live even if they lose their head, because their brain isn't in their head. They have one little brain in their head, they've got another one in their shoulders, and they have another one in the middle of their back, and they have another one towards their butt, because each does a little bit of a different job, and that's how they can move 6 legs. Can you think of how hard and confusing it would be to try to move 6 legs? Or if we think about that millipede again, having to control hundreds of legs, they can only do that because they have a little tiny brain. They have multiple little tiny brains around like that, which is nuts. And you're right, yeah, Haley, they do. So they can regrow something like a leg. So if a cockroach loses a leg and it's still a baby, it can grow that leg back every time it molts. But if it's an adult and it loses a leg, they don't molt after they're adults, so it just won't have a leg anymore. And that's okay. I've seen cockroaches do pretty okay with up to 3 legs. As long as they have 3 legs, they're okay. When you get down to like the 2 legs, it's pretty hard to move. Does anyone have any other questions about insects or cockroaches? Has anyone seen cockroaches here in Colorado? Maybe. Yeah, they're not, most of the cockroaches we have are kept as pets or in a zoo. We don't really have any out here. Now I'm going to shift gears into talking about something that has 8 legs. What group of animals has 8 legs? It's my favorite group of animals.
Spider.
Yeah, spiders, which is awesome. Is everyone okay talking about spiders? Maybe?
I do not really like spiders. I'm kind
Why not?
of scared of them.
What's scary about spiders? A lot of people are afraid of spiders.
A couple of them are poisonous, like tarantulas.
Yeah. So what's crazy?
Tarantulas.
I love tarantulas. Does anyone know the difference between the word venom and poison? No? So one of them, so if you think about what animals you think of as being poisonous, poisonous is something that you have to eat for it to hurt you. So there's something like, a poison dart frog. That's not something that's biting you to be poisonous, right? And then venom is something that's biting or stinging you. So snakes are venomous. Spiders can be venomous. Almost all spiders have venom. And something like a scorpion is venomous versus something like a millipede is poisonous. And I was okay holding a millipede because I didn't eat it. If I ate it, you know what would happen? I'd get super sick and I'd throw up and that'd be really gross on camera and embarrassing. And I wouldn't have my millipedes anymore. So don't eat millipedes. Don't touch centipedes, right? Because centipedes are venomous, millipedes are poisonous. So let's talk about some spiders. So one of the things I want to start with is, how many legs do spiders have? You can shout it out if you want to.
They have like 8 or 6, either 8 or 6.
Which one, 6 or 8?
8.
8, right? So I have a tarantula here in plastic. Let's count its legs real quick. So we know it's supposed to have 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is confusing, right? So if I bring that closer, you see how these 2 legs are a little bit shorter and weirder looking than the other legs? That's because they're not legs, they're mouth parts. They've got little things that look like legs that are mouth parts. And what they'll do is when they're walking around, they'll tap those in front of them. They're not walking on them, they're tapping. And that's how they taste and smell stuff to see what's around. Because most spiders have terrible vision. Most spiders can't see very well at all. There's a couple, like a jumping spider. Has anyone seen jumping spiders before? Yeah, those ones have really good vision as far as spider vision goes, but most spiders can't see very well. And these weird little legs are called pedipalps. And with males, that's actually part of how males mate. They'll keep their sperm in their pedipalps, which is really interesting because it's in their mouth. So one of the most famous kind of spiders out there, does everyone know what the most famous kind of spider out there is maybe? Anybody?
Tarantula.
Tarantulas, maybe, but it's a smaller spider. We have them here in Colorado. They have their whole own superhero in Marvel. Yeah, exactly, a black widow. So I have one here. Let me see if I can move her so you can see her better. There we go. Do you see her right there? So this is a pretty big one because she lives in a bug zoo, so I feed her every week. So she's a little bit big. But some people think black widows are huge. And they're actually, they can be pretty small. And they're black and glossy, and you can see that. And what are black widows so infamous for? What does everybody know about black widows? You can shout it out or you can put it in the text, in the chat.
They're venomous.
Are they venomous?
They're venom, right? A lot of people think of black widows as being super dangerous, right? So if you had a guess in the last 100 years in the US, how many people have died from black widow bites? What would your guess be?
10-ish.
10-ish? Anyone have a higher number or a lower number? In the whole US in 100 years, how many people do you think have died from black widow bites? 64, 10? Anyone think it's a really high number? So you guys are close. You know how many it is? It's 3. In the last 100 years, there's only been 3 people who have died from black widow bites in the entire country. And all 3 of those people had heart conditions already. So for the most part, black widow venom isn't that bad. It turns out it can hurt if you get bitten. It's designed to make mammals really hurt and think to yourself, this is really painful and I'm going to be careful around black widows from now on. But it doesn't really do anything that will like kill you. Usually it just hurts. It can make you feel really nauseous. There's this weird symptom called impending sense of doom, which makes you just feel really freaked out because it can start making you hyperventilate. But for the most part, after 6 hours, it goes away. And the most interesting thing about black widows, in my opinion, is it's actually really hard to get them to bite you. So most people don't ever get bitten by a black widow. And if they do, it's only if the black widow gets squished. And almost every time, like 9 times out of 10, they'll bite and they won't use their venom because they use their venom to eat. And so if they bit you and they survived and they had used their venom and then they found food, they wouldn't be able to eat it and then they could starve. So most of the time, black widows are totally harmless. That being said, it's usually a good idea not to pick them up or anything like that and to leave them alone. And if you're in an area like Colorado where we have a lot of black widows, to be aware of where you are. A lot of the time they'll hang out in things like wood piles. And so making sure you're careful when you're picking stuff up from a wood pile, because if you put your hand on one, that can make it feel squished and they can bite with that. But for the most part, most people are totally fine. And you can go to the hospital if you don't feel safe, but they don't even give you the anti-venom anymore because it turns out more people died from the anti-venom than from the venom itself. So most of the time people just say, wait it out.
It's rare to be bit by a black widow. They only bite when they're actually very, very scared.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not even when they're mostly scared. You have to be squeezing them. And that's the only time that they get scared enough to bite. So most people, you're right, don't get bitten at all by black widows. Did someone else have a spider question or a black widow question? Yeah.
Do you know the least venomous spider in the world?
The least venomous? So almost all spiders have venom, but like 99.999% of that venom doesn't even affect humans. And there's one spider that we know of so far. I'm sure we'll find more, but there's one spider out there that eats pollen. So it's like a vegetarian spider. And so I'd probably guess that that one has the least venom, but it's like a teeny tiny little tiny spider. And then I saw someone ask about brown recluses, and I'm really glad they asked because do you guys know where brown recluses don't live? here in Colorado. We don't get brown recluses here. In the last, they've been documenting brown recluse cases for the last 20 years. And in 20 years, they've had over 30,000 reports. And out of those 30,000 reports, only 10 of them have actually been brown recluses. And they came in on outdoor furniture and camping equipment. So they don't occur here in Colorado. It's too dry, it's too cold in the winter, so we don't have brown recluses here. With that being said, people also talk about how dangerous brown recluses are, and most people do not react to their venom. So less than 2% of the population even reacts to their venom. And most of the time when you hear all these horror stories about brown recluse bites, they aren't actually brown recluse bites. That, you know how on the internet you hear about like all this stuff with necrotic tissue, that's actually usually a bacterial infection that's been misdiagnosed. So one of the things that's really interesting to me is it's impossible to tell what bit you based off a bite. So if you came to me and you said, what is this bite? I would have to say, I don't know, I'm sorry. And a doctor wouldn't be able to tell you what it is either, because the only way you can tell what bit you is if you watch something bite you and you catch it and you bring it to an entomologist, because doctors are so good at being able to tell what a lot of things are that are wrong with people, but they're not trained entomologists, so they don't know. And on top of that, everybody's immune systems react so differently that I can be bitten by a mosquito, and then that mosquito can go and land on my sister and bite her, and I don't even swell up. My mosquito bites don't itch. I think that's probably why I can be an entomologist, because I don't really react to mosquito bites. And she'll swell up and have huge itchy welts, and it's the same mosquito, just two different reactions. There's 40,000 different kinds of spiders in the world, and like half of them occur here in the US. So in North America, we've got hundreds of thousands of different kinds of spider out there. So spiders are awesome. They're probably one of my favorite animals. What is another kind of arachnid that people know about that's not a spider? Something else that
Is it like
has 8
some type
legs.
of, I don't know,
Anyone recognize what this is?
scorpion?
Yeah, it's a scorpion, right? So it's an arachnid, so we know it has to have how many legs again? How many legs do arachnids have? It's more than 6, less than 10.
8.
8, right? So if we look at this scorpion, how many legs are we seeing here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What about these two up here? Do you think those are legs? Nope. Remember how we talked about with the tarantula? They have these things called pedipalps.
They're
Guess
pinchers.
what?
They have venom in them. So
They
do
don't
their
have venom in them.
gills.
But what's crazy is, and I'm going to tell you all a secret about scorpions, which is that those pinchers at the front are mouth parts again. Can you imagine having a pair of arms coming out of your mouth to help you eat? That's crazy to me. So the way that scorpions use their pinchers is to help them eat. So if you ever watch a scorpion eat, what it'll do is it'll grab the food with its first big pincher and bring it close. And then inside of its mouth, they've got teeny tiny little pinchers, and they'll take delicate little bites like this. Little dainty bites. So scorpion pinchers are mouth parts, which is awesome. Now somebody mentions venom, right? And a stinger, and that's in the tail. So you can see right here, they have a tail that's used for stinging. And scorpions, some scorpions have really dangerous venom. So for the most part, I would recommend not getting stung by a scorpion. A lot of the ones we have here in the US can hurt but not be bad. The most famous one we have here in the US is the Arizona bark scorpion, and that's one that hurts a lot, but it's not going to kill you. But there are way more scorpions out there that can be lethal, especially because some people can be allergic to scorpions, and most people don't find out until they're having an allergic reaction, which can be dangerous. So scorpions are really cool, and I have one here with us. His name is Mordecai, and he is our flat rock scorpion. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys look at him. I'm going to see if you guys can find him, and then I'm going to do anything. I'm going to do something that might make it easier to find him. So, oh, I breathed on him, that made him move. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to turn off the lights so that we can see something really cool that scorpions do. So scorpions are really cool because they fluoresce under black light. Can you all see that? So they glow in the dark. So one of the ways the entomologists go to find scorpions in the wild is they'll take a flashlight like this, a black light, and they'll start looking around, and then when you hit the scorpion, it glows almost like a glow stick. And that's how entomologists find scorpions in the wild, which is awesome. So I'm gonna go turn the light back on so I can see you all better. But I think that's awesome. And scorpions are really cool because they glow. And you know what? We don't really know why they glow. So some people have thought that maybe the reason they glow under UV like that is because it's aposematic coloration, which means warning coloration. So it shines for other insects at night, and so they can see it better and they know to stay away because of the venom. Has anyone seen any scorpions here in Colorado before? Maybe. We've got like 6 different species maybe that we can get here in Colorado. I haven't seen any this far north, like Loveland or Fort Collins, but I mean, I've seen them as pets, but I haven't seen any in the wild. Down south, we'll definitely have them down in Pueblo, Colorado Springs even, and then further south, we can get scorpions out here, which is awesome. And the scorpions we have here aren't very bad. Again, Arizona bark scorpion's the worst one out here, and it hurts, but it's not one that can kill you. But if you go to other tropical areas, they have some pretty serious scorpions that you have to watch out for. So as a rule, unless you're an entomologist, you shouldn't touch a scorpion. Does anyone have questions about a scorpion or scorpions in general? You're welcome to ask them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself for them.
How do they sting?
That's a great question. So if we look at the scorpion's stinger, so this is its abdomen, right? And then it has even more restrictions here. And then at the very end, it's got like a little barb, right? So it's got a little thing that can pierce the skin. And then there's venom here. And then it squeezes muscles and that pushes the venom into their stinger. I got my scorpion from my friends at Scales and Tails, because I have people who have, I've had a couple of the scorpions I've had actually came in on people's luggage, where I've had people contact me and say, I went to this place and I was unpacking and there's a scorpion. So I've gotten a couple that way. I got one in the mail and someone didn't label it. So I just had like a yogurt container one day that showed up in the mail for the Bug Zoo. And if you're gonna send something like a scorpion, please label it. So I opened it up being like, I don't know what this is. And there was a scorpion that had been shipped all the way from Arizona, and they like had forgotten to email me telling me they're gonna overnight ship me a scorpion. So I came into work and there was a scorpion in a container on my desk. You can catch scorpions, but again, I wouldn't recommend it unless you're going with an entomologist, just in case so you know what kind of scorpion it is. But you can buy scorpions as pets. They're really boring pets. So one of the things, and I'm going to talk about tarantulas next, but the number one thing that kills pet tarantulas and pet scorpions is obesity. That's a great question, Molly. We don't really know how many people have died from scorpion stings because it's really hard to keep track of it. So people don't know necessarily what they've been stung by, so they can get stung by something and then die from it, but they don't know what stung them. And they also can get stung and have some other medical condition, and the venom interacts with the medical condition, so then it's unclear if you say that they died because of the scorpion or because of the medical condition. And then the third is some people die of scorpion bites and it's never, or scorpion stings and it's never reported. So it's really hard to keep track of how many people have died from scorpion stings or spider bites in the world, because, you know, it's really hard. So that's a really good question though. The number one thing that kills pet tarantulas and pet scorpions is obesity. Isn't that crazy? They can get so fat that they die. And that's because, you know what a scorpion does all day? This. That's all he does all day long. He'll sit and he'll wait, and he'll sit and he'll wait, and he'll do that for hours. And the only time he really moves around is when you feed him or when you poke him and like disturb him. And so people who have pet scorpions feed them a lot because they'll always accept food, but they don't move a lot, so they can get really fat, and then that fat can crush their organs. Or when they molt, remember what I said happens when they molt? They come out and they're all soft and white and squishy. And so suddenly without that structure, having that much fat in their body can actually crush their organs. And so if you have a tarantula or a scorpion as a pet, it's really important that you only feed them a little bit, even if they act like they're hungry, because he will act like he's hungry all day long, even if he's not hungry, and he'll be okay, because they only eat like once or twice in the wild a month. So they don't eat 5 or 6 crickets a week in the wild, and so they can get really fat. Does anyone else have other questions about scorpions? I'm sorry, bud.
And speaking of spiders that you were talking about, actually, I think I might know what the biggest spider in the world is.
The biggest spider in the world?
I don't think you have this, but it's the Goliath bird
The
eater.
Goliath bird eater. You know what? I did have a Goliath bird eater for a while, but they don't do very well in Colorado because they're from a kind of swampy area. And so they need a lot of humidity, but also a lot of airflow. And that's so hard to do in Colorado because it's dry. And so ours got stuck inside of her molt and she couldn't get out. And it actually ended up blocking off her spiracles, so she couldn't breathe very well and died, which was really sad. So they're really hard to take care of. And they're huge. They can be 9 inches across, which is giant. And you know how many times we fed her? She got 1 cockroach once a month. And we have another one now. I have a salmon pink bird eater tarantula, and she only gets 1 cockroach every other month because she's so fat, even though she's barely eating anything. So would you all like to talk about tarantulas now then? Maybe. Tarantulas are a pretty big hit. How are we doing for time, Haley? I do not have a clock in here.
You have about 10 minutes.
Perfect. 10 minutes is the perfect amount of time to talk about tarantulas.
Yay.
So I have a special tarantula here with me named Ivy. And Ivy is a rose hair tarantula. Has anyone ever been to the Butterfly Pavilion before? Maybe? And does anyone know the name of their very famous tarantula at the Butterfly Pavilion?
I am.
Rosie, yeah. And you know what's crazy? Is the very first Rosie the rose hair at the Butterfly Pavilion came from the CSU Bug Zoo. Because the person who started the Butterfly Pavilion was here at CSU and then went and started the Butterfly Pavilion. So he used his Rosie, named Rosie. And then when she was too old to go out to do outreaches, that original #1 first Rosie came and retired at the Bug Zoo. So I took care of her for the last few years of her life. Does anyone have any guess about how long tarantulas can live? Because that's like a long time for a tarantula to be at a Butterfly Pavilion, right?
Maybe like 3-ish years.
3-ish years. They can live longer than 3 years. Anyone else have any guesses? Bigger than 3. You know what? It's even bigger than 20. It's longer than 20 years. It's maybe 51. What's nuts is we don't actually know how long they can live. So they used to say 20 years, and that was 20 years ago, and people are like, but I still have my tarantula. And so now they're saying 30, 40, we're not really sure. So we have a tarantula here at the Bug Zoo named Machi, and we've had her she's now 41. We've had her for 41 years. So my friend Matt got her when he was a teenager, and now his kids are almost teenagers, which is crazy. And he's had her this whole time. And so she's probably in her 40s, which is awesome. So tarantulas can live a long time. So if you get a pet tarantula, it's almost like getting a pet tortoise because they can live for so long if you do it right. So this is Ivy. And I don't know how old Ivy is, but I'm going to guess in her mid-20s, maybe even 30. And she's called a rose hair because you can see she's got some pink hairs right there on the back of her head. And that's why they call them rose hair tarantulas. Now, tarantulas are really cool because there's 2 different groups of tarantulas. There's something called the New World tarantulas and something called the Old World tarantulas. And Old World tarantulas live in like Asia and Africa. And those tarantulas can be really aggressive. And they have venom that can really hurt, but there isn't a tarantula in the world that's been known to kill anyone. Their venom doesn't really affect humans in a way that kills them. It just kind of hurts. Now, New World tarantulas like Rosie here, or like Ivy here, who's from Chile, have these really cool things on the back here called urticating hairs. And urticating hairs, has anyone ever gotten stuck by a cactus or played with like insulation fiber? It's not very much fun, is it? It's itchy, it stings, it gets into your skin, it's horrible feeling, and that's exactly what they do. So a tarantula has, a New World tarantula like Ivy here, has something I call the 4-step defense program. And the first thing a tarantula does if it's scared is it takes off, it hides, it tries to get away. And the second thing it'll do, if you keep bothering after that, is she'll turn around, and on her abdomen she's got those crazy hairs, and she'll take her back legs and go and kick off this cloud of hairs. What do you think eats a tarantula? What kind of animals do you think would eat a tarantula? And again, I can't hear or see you all, so you'll have to, yeah, a bird. What kind of birds? Like, do you think a robin would, or do you think it'd be something more like a hawk? Or a seagull maybe? So things like crows and hawks will definitely eat a tarantula. I don't think an eagle would. It's probably too small for an eagle, but a hawk totally would. Or what about something like a coyote? You think coyotes would eat a tarantula? I don't have any birds because how many legs do birds have? It's less than 6, so I don't have any. So something like a coyote would love to eat a tarantula. Tarantulas are like really, really full of protein. Coyotes will absolutely eat a tarantula. Something like a cat, like feral cats or even people's house cats, if you live somewhere that can have tarantulas, will eat tarantulas, and even people. There's people who eat tarantulas. So all those animals that I'm mentioning that eat tarantulas have something in common, and it's they've got really delicate eyes, and they've got nice mucousy membranes on their mouth and nose, right? So what that tarantula will do when she kicks off her cloud of hairs is she'll aim for your eyes and your mouth and your nose. And while you're there going, oh, geez, this is a horrible feeling, and it's itchy and it hurts and I don't want it anymore, she gets to run away. The third thing a tarantula do is if you keep messing with them after they've flicked off all of their hairs, is she'll go 4 legs down, 4 legs up, and be like, hey, I'm a big spider. Look at how big of a spider I am. She might even start moving her fangs like this, being like, you see these? I'll use them. Please leave me alone. And if you keep messing with her after they do that threat posture, they might even smack you with their legs and be like, I'm going to bite you if you keep doing this. And then the very last thing they'll do is bite. And just like the black widow, they can choose whether or not to use their venom. And most of the time they don't use their venom, because if they use their venom on you, they can't eat later. And if I went through all of this with Ivy, I made her flick her hairs, and I got her to do her throat posture, and I got her to bite me, and she used her venom, you know what would happen to me? Nothing. Mammals don't react to their venom, which is why people really like this kind of a pet, because they don't eat mammals. They eat bugs, and so their venom liquefies bugs, but mammals, it doesn't even affect us. It'll kind of swell up a little bit. Maybe it'll be a little itchy for like an hour, and then it'll be fine. It's less bad than a bee sting. So with that being said, I'm going to take her out so we can all look at her and watch her walk. Let's see how she's feeling. There's air conditioning in here, which might make her a little crabby. See, there's that nice threat posture. So I don't think I'm going to take her out because she's a little crabby, because there's air blowing on her. So one of the other things about tarantulas is they can feel when you breathe on them, because if you're something like a bird or a coyote and you're coming up behind them, if they can feel that you're breathing on them, that can make them better defended, so they know you're there. Yeah, lizards and snakes also totally eat tarantulas. Now what's really cool is we have tarantulas here in Colorado, and the tarantulas we have here in Colorado are called Aphona pelmahensi, or they're sometimes called Oklahoma brown, Texas brown, burrowing browns, and Texas tans. They've got 4 different common names. And right now they're getting ready to go migrate. And it's not a real migration, because migration means all of the animals get up and move somewhere and then come back. It's really like a walkabout. But what happens is, we talked about female tarantulas living into their 40s, right? But male tarantulas can only live to be like maybe 10. As soon as they mature, part of what happens when they're mature is they develop those swollen pedipalps, the little mouth parts actually get swollen and they can't molt anymore. And so once they become sexually mature, they can't molt anymore and they die. And so the males will all get up at the same time and they'll start wandering around for females. And one of the reasons tarantulas can live so long if they're females is they dig themselves a little hole and they nestle into their little hole and they never come out again. They stay in their hole and they'll come out to grab food and pull it in. But a female tarantula can live for 40 years because she digs herself a hole, and if nothing happens to that hole, she's safe from everything. Does anyone have any other questions about tarantulas or even just general bug questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I think I know what else eats tarantulas.
What else do you think eats tarantulas?
Predators of tarantulas include lizards, snakes, spider-eating birds, coyotes, and foxes.
Yep, and those are all ones that they have to worry about their eyes getting those hairs in them. There's also this other crazy thing called a tarantula hawk wasp, and there's a whole wasp out there that eats entire whole tarantulas, which is crazy. Does anyone else have other questions about bugs that I can answer for them?
Looks
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm gonna go then, but it was so nice to talk to everybody.
Thank
And
you
if you
so
all have,
much for
of course,
Maya.
yeah, and if you all have other questions, you can always email us at csubugzoo@gmail.com. I also set up tours when you can have people on campus again. Hopefully, eventually we'll be able to do tours of the Bug Zoo where I can show you all of our other animals. We've got 48 different species at the Bug Zoo.
Wow, nice. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, we had so much fun. I know everybody was so excited, and we just really appreciate your time, and we love your passion for bugs because they're so cool.
They're
So
the coolest animals.
they are. They really are. Well, we hope you have a great day, and thanks everybody for coming and watching this great program, and we'll see you guys later.
Yeah, it was nice to talk to everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.